Welcome to the Jersey Justice Podcast, featuring your hosts, attorneys Gerald Clark and Mark Morris.
All right, Governor McGreevey, thanks for being here today.
My pleasure.
So listen.
Thank you to you and Mark, and I appreciate it. And just, it's good to be in Brick City.
So we had on Justice Barry Albin recently, and I was like a little nervous in the beginning. I'm like, you're the highest profile guest we've had. And I don't know if Justice Albin will disagree, but I think you probably trump him in terms of being a more higher profile guest. But what's funny is I'm less nervous now than I was with Justice Albin, probably because you got this magnanimous, crazy natual politician.
Disarming effect.
Disarming personality.
Mark just cleaned that up for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. No, but Barry's also, Barry's former Supreme Court Justice, Cornell Law School, Cornell Law Review. So for those of us that are lawyers, he is like at the top of his game intellectually and as a published author in terms of Supreme Courts. I don't know if Barry has more dissents than concurrences, but no, he's clearly one of the great giants, I would suggest, in our profession in the state of New Jersey. So unlike me, who, argues and advocates from the position of the law for reentry clients or for veterans or for people in the throes of addiction, for me, I consider that to be critically important, and particularly for the people I work with. But Barry's on Mount Olympus.
All right, so listen. So normally these podcasts go maybe at least 2 hours, 3 hours, but you're tight on time. You're running for mayor. You are, as I understand, advocating for legislation in favor of reentry to facilitate the reentry of convicts or former.
Court-involved persons.
Court-involved persons.
There you go. Because, the reason why I use that language, because it's broad enough, because whether somebody's just been arrested, somebody's in prison, somebody's come home on parole, somebody who's off parole but at home, they still have the baggage, the legacy of their indictment, of their conviction, and of their sentencing. So it's wherever you are in the process, typically you need some level of support.
How did you get involved in it? Everyone knows about your career. You can Google it. By the way, this is stream of consciousness stuff. But one of the last things you did as governor is you signed the anti-pay to play.
Yep.
I'm assuming it was an executive order.
Yes.
And another thing, because I read your book, Confession, amazing page turner, by the way.
You're far too kind.
I'm serious. It was an amazing.
Mark's still on page 10.
No, I scrammed. I got done last night. It's all flagged up and everything. Check marks. Great book. It really is.
Two of the biggest things I took out of that was you signed the anti-pay to play, and then the party line on the ballot.
Yep.
That's a big kind of control of politics in New Jersey, is controlling the party line. Could you have both of those change now? I think Andy Kim sued to get rid of the party line, apparently.
Yeah,
did the pay-to-play thing end, or is it still there?
No, Jared, there's sort of this struggle to control ethical dollars in government, I think, is always going to be part of the American political landscape, I would argue, unfortunately. And
well, when they did the Constitution, the people that had rights, when the framers were the landowning males. They were the ones that had the rights. So it started out that way.
Yeah, and when we see is in the Supreme Court decision that basically provided for virtually unrestricted
money.
Citizens United.
Citizens United case had such a pernicious impact in terms of the amount of dollars and how dollars could be impacted, particularly, I would suggest, on the federal level.
Do you ever hear the band NoFX? There's a punk rock band called NoFX. They were, off label for years. They just did their last show. If you know anything about punk rock, and they
which I don't.
Which you don't. I was confused by the haircut. I thought maybe with the haircut.
Exactly. No, I just have a good Dominican barber.
Yeah. Okay. But they write songs about that. And one of the lines in the songs that it goes, "America's for sale, and you can get a good deal on it." But anyway.
Yeah, I would just push back on that. I mean, I think our system is, I would argue, the greatest system in the world. We have the greatest democracy. Be that as it may, I think dollars have an impact, a pernicious impact. But you look at different models. The British model, the length of the campaign is significantly truncated, and they control the dollars much more equitably. So I think it's a process of the length of the campaign. I mean, today you could make an argument, particularly in presidential campaigns, people start running the day after the existing president puts their hand on the Bible. So that, I mean, campaigns have gotten longer.
Yeah.
And I happen to be a Lincoln fanatic, but there was a time when, like, President Lincoln didn't even attend the convention, the Republican convention, where he was nominated. It was considered to be inappropriate to be advocating for oneself. And so that literally he would be listening to teletype and receiving the results. So, and then with the advent of social media and the 24 news cycle, I think all of that has become exacerbated so that almost politics has become a full-time profession for some. And then, unfortunately, when the fairness doctrine went by the board and you had just multiple news organizations. I mean, Jerry...
What's the fairness doctrine?
The fairness doctrine that basically provided that if you were providing for a news organization...
that you had to give equal time.
Well, there was some level of balance.
Right.
And...
now it's camps.
Exactly. That's well said. And so I remember talking to my father and his friends. All these guys had served in World War II. They came back home, and whether it's Brokaw, I mean, they would watch ABC, CBS, or NBC.
Right.
My father happened to be an Irish Catholic Democrat, but his buddies could have been a Republican or whatever ethnicity or background. But they all watched, to your point, the same news.
Right.
So whether it was, it was Jerry, as Mark, or Jim, we all received our news from the same framework. And today, we watch news, well, many of us watch news that reflects our own predispositions, our own biases.
Yeah, echo chambers.
Yeah.
I think because it's like I think the old way, Walter Cronkite single-handedly ended the Vietnam War when he gave that report saying, "I went there and there's no end in sight." So the dangerous part of that is that it's fixated on 3 channels. Now you can get news anywhere, but the dangerous part of that, or the downside of that, is people go into their echo chambers and they're flooded with information that they can't even, so they just go on Make America Great Again, or the immigrants are all bad, because they don't have the time to really dive into issues because it's information overload.
Yeah, it becomes a loop.
Yeah, but I would also make the argument, Jerry. I hear what you're saying in terms of ABC, CBS, and NBC, but I would also make the argument, when you had 3 major broadcast channels and public television, or in the UK, BBC, that there was a real level of expertise, a real level of professionalism, a real level of research, that the networks were all watching very carefully what each other were saying.
Right.
They were competing in real time for the bulk of the large swath of the American population. Yeah. But then you compare that today, and whether you're watching NPR or CNN or Fox, I mean, people say things that clearly haven't been vetted, clearly haven't been gone through the gristmill to determine its accuracy. Because you're talking to people who have similar biases, viewpoints, and so there's not the same drive for balance and accuracy.
So listen, we try to stay away from politics because YouTube makes it harder for us to get the show out if we talk politics.
Yeah, I'll get off politics.
But given you're running for Jersey City mayor and you're the former governor, screw it. I'm gonna dive right into the issue, okay? If Trump gets in, now this is probably going to air after the election, after November 4th, I guess is the date. What is the deal? Like, how is this even close? Like, I don't get it. You have someone up there that says, I'm going to use the military against the people. We're going to put these reporters in jail. All this crazy stuff, not to mention the conviction for sexual assault. What is going on? What's your take on all this? How is this even a close election?
That's a tough question. I mean, I go back to...
I don't understand it.
I go back, I mean, you know, James Carville is someone that...
Raging Cajun.
Yeah, the Raging Cajun and leader in the Democratic Party, a strategist, a tactician. Yeah. And Carville would always say that at the end of the day, it's the economy.
Stupid.
Stupid. Stupid. And so, you know, when you look at Carville, I think that's what, you know, as someone who clearly is, and, you know, I have an understanding of New Jersey. I don't have an understanding of national politics. But I think Carville's point was, in his most recent interviews, talks about the economy. And that being said, the economy is in pretty sound shape. Although there are pockets where clearly there have been challenges. I mean, you know, and then the question Carville points to is if inflation was high and then it recedes, or the market had different inflection points but recedes, at what point do people recognize that they are in the status quo as opposed to a fluctuation? So if Mrs. Smith goes out and buys eggs or a quart of milk or a gallon of milk, and inflation is X, but then eventually comes down, I mean, Carville's point is, well, when does Mrs. Smith begin to accept that the economy is in this better position?
Yeah.
And then you also have the intention with interest rates. I mean, interest rates have increased so that money is tight within the general economy, so that, you know, in Jersey City, you see these precipitously high rents. I mean, the highest in the nation.
Well, it's gentrification a lot.
Gentrification, you see high property taxes. And so that for middle-class families, for working families, you see real financial pressures. And so the question is, you know, who's to blame? I mean, and so that I think people focus, rightly or wrongly, on the next election, the election that's in front of their face, whether or not that individual, I mean, it also works in the inverse, right? Because you can have presidential politics impacting the economy, but then you have a governor's race. So the question is how does the viewer view, if you accept Carville's thesis, at that particular point of time?
So Governor, only because what I see, you're a guy we could talk to for 6 hours.
Oh.
But it seems like we don't quite have that. So I do want to say, 24-hour news cycle, everything moves along. But Jerry and I, you're here. We're not trying to entice you. The Confession, excellent read. And there were a ton of things I highlighted, flagged when I was going through it. But just to, I guess, kind of summarize, it's been almost 20 years since you were in office. But made a quick list.
It's been 20 years.
It has been 20 years.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
So you implemented Easy Pass, lowered auto insurance rates. You had a multi-billion-dollar budget deficit, I think, when you took over. Stem cell research projects, breast cancer funding, a lot of stuff that you did while you were in office. I think the Atlantic Highlands Preservation Act.
Sure, the Highlands.
Things. So in a short period of time, you got a lot of things done. And then obviously you've been out of office now for some time, but I understand now you're back in politics. And what are you kind of doing these days to stay busy?
Well, I'm still doing, and as Jerry and I talked about earlier, I mean, I'm still doing reentry. It's what I love. And that is for people coming back from prison, coming back from jail, coming back from addiction treatment, and veterans. The veterans cases, Jerry, are tough. I mean, the highest degree of homelessness, highest degree of suicide, highest degree of mental illness. We just had a seminar yesterday on veteran suicide. And the numbers are atrocious. So, and the numbers, if I can, this is so important. To me, this is like one of those pressing American issues that I don't give a darn if you're all the way to the left or all the way to the right. Guys and gals who put on this nation's uniform and go abroad and come back and are kicked to the curb. I don't, you know, whatever you believe in, if you put if you're an American citizen. So what happens is there are two areas that are appalling to me personally. One is something called OTH, other than honorable veterans, and that is, and we have some sense, if your father was in the service, your uncles were in the service, your parents, mothers in the service, that you have an honorable discharge, you have a general discharge, and something called OTH, other than honorable, and then you have a bad conduct and dishonorable. If you're OTH, we had a young fellow obviously from New Jersey. He goes over, he serves in the United States Marine Corps, puts the uniform on, he's in Mount Fuji, and you have tsunami. Tsunami takes out 2 nuclear reactors. Joe Biden at this time is vice president. They send these young guys down to clean up this radioactive disaster. They put a piece of plastic on these guys on a Geiger counters. They're 18, 19 years old. They think they're immortal. Some of these guys literally ripped off the plastic. And they're exposed to intensive levels of radiation. This poor young man right now has nodules all underneath his armpits, on his chest, and he was clearly exposed. He said to me, when he went through that, he felt his body develop a tingly sensation. He felt his body change. And he started drinking. He started drinking worse and worse. The Marines sent him back from Japan, from Mount Fuji, back to the U.S., drinks more and more. Finally, he gets out and he gets something called an OTH, other than honorable discharge. Now he has cancer riddled throughout his body. The only thing that will work will be an experimental drug regimen. But the sad reality is, for him, for his young daughter, for his he has another child, they will receive virtually no benefits. The only benefits he's entitled to is a short period of mental health benefits. And so what's happening is young people today, whether they're in Spring Lake, whether they're in Hudson County, whether they're in Essex, or young people, guys and gals that go to the military are like guys and gals all across America. And what happens is young people today, maybe our generation, well, I'm older than clearly more than Jerry, but they might have drank or whatever, but not this young fellow, but a lot of young people use drugs, whether it's, whether marijuana, which is illegal now in the state of New Jersey. But what happens in the military, you still get discharged. Yeah. You still get discharged from the Marine Corps. And what happens is the Marines don't determine your level of health benefits. Your discharge classification determines your benefits. So if you were discharged for drinking and get an OTH, but you basically confronted cancer because you were cleaning up radioactivity. Now all of a sudden what determines your benefits isn't what you were exposed to, is what you did on the way out. And so for me, when you look at these cases, Mark, and particularly veterans, and then guys and gals coming home, and the year they're left off Department of Defense, you get out of your military uniform, whether you're in the Army, in the Air Force, Marines, and the year you get into the VA, Veterans Administration, that year so often is a critical time for depression, for anxiety, and then these guys are suffering PTSD. Yeah. They literally, guys, Jer, that were in Patterson, New Jersey, and 9 months later, they're in Afghanistan protecting themselves as a tail gunner, and it's like mind-boggling to these young men, the transformation of their lives. So, this is what I've done. So for me, seeing government work, but then being literally blessed with, resignation, downfall, and you just see the power of second chances. Sure. And for me, there's an old spiritual that says we fall down, but we get up. Part of this.
Yeah, but the downfall is largely like if that happened today, I'm not sure you would have felt the need to resign because most of it was the relationship with the guy.
Yeah.
But times have so much changed. Pete Buttigieg's on Fox News all the time. It's great,
Yeah. No,
so a lot of that, you call it downfall. I'm not so sure. And I read your book. It was really a time thing.
Yeah, but it was also
because it was less accepted back then.
Yeah, clearly, being in a gay relationship was less accepted, but still was still wrong. You're still still married. I'm in a relationship. But I mean, no, but
but look at the national election right now.
Yes.
I mean, come on.
No,
do people really care that
no,
much anymore?
I mean, that's...
So was it really a downfall? I guess it was for that time.
Yeah.
But had it happened today, I'm not sure the result. I'm not sure you would have resigned. I'm not sure people would have really cared.
Yeah, I know. I think.
And when you got up and said, I'm a gay American, I mean, that was like you broke the ice, not just for your own personal and New Jersey, but for the nation. And then in the heels of that, Justice Albin, who you appointed, legalized gay marriage and ordered the state to issue a marriage license to a gay couple. I mean, so what you did, your quote unquote downfall, I'm not sure it was as much of a downfall as you may characterize it, number one. And number two, it was a huge thing for the country and for people that grew up gay and were tortured with a Catholic upbringing, or God forbid anyone knows. So that's a huge, great thing, I think.
No, thank you. I still receive letters, and during the time when I announced, literally thousands of letters from all over the country, guys that had marriages that knew that they were gay, women, young people. The toughest cases for me was a buddy of mine invited me down to Washington, D.C. to meet these young leaders.
I don't see it as a downfall and you asking for a second chance. I think Jersey City and the citizens of Hudson County would be freaking lucky as hell to have you back in office. I mean that. I don't think this is, please give me a second chance. I think this is like, because I met you, read your book in person, incredibly smart, philosophy, law degree, you really care. One of the biggest things I took out of that book is, despite all the reputation of corruption in New Jersey, you left the State House with $7,000 in the bank.
Yeah.
Okay? So I think the citizens of Jersey City and Hudson County and our larger community would be quite lucky to have you back.
No, thank you. It's very kind of you. But it's just, it was a downfall in the sense of when Alexandra Pelosi did the movie, she called it Fall to Grace. And so what happens is, when you fall, it has a way of clarifying what's important to you. When all of a sudden you're driving away from Drumthwacket in your Chevy, it becomes really important. It becomes really clear what's important. What's important is
and who your
family,
friends are.
Your family. You realize whether it's your parents, my mom and dad, whether it's my daughters, whether it's my ex-spouses, whether it's friends and family, your faith and service. And so I think reentry, whatever I've brought to reentry, I've gained so much more to this morning. I was on the phone with a guy from Monmouth County, just came home from federal and state prison, had a great job, was very successful, got confused, made bad decisions business, and now all of a sudden, after being away for a number of years, is now struggling to find a job. He's reunified with his family, and he was just sharing with me almost the schizophrenia between loving to be home, loving to be his wife who held the family together, who paid the bills, who paid the mortgage. His son, I said, he said, your son is going to give me some documents. And I said, it's, forget what time in the morning. How come the kid's up? Kid's not up. And he goes, yeah, he's had it easy for a while he's been gone. And then all of a sudden now getting back into civil society and having the struggle of having a felony conviction. And that's, in terms of what you do professionally, in terms of what the firm does, we just need to understand that the worst decision a young fellow made, young gal made, shouldn't be determinative, shouldn't determine the rest of their lives. And that's what's so important. And now, on veterans, 1 out of every 3 veterans is now court involved. 1 out of every 3, in no small measure because of the trauma they suffered. Yeah. And then how they tried to anesthetize themselves, whether you talk about alcoholism or CDS. And so the importance for me is the power of second chances, is the power to come back, to do it well, to do it right, and to be our better selves.
All right, real quick, because I know we're short on time, so maybe give a 30-second or 1-minute version. How's it going to be different this time around? Because you write a lot in your book about the pressures.
Yeah.
How the power and so how is it? And by the way, you were in your 40s back then. I mean, that's God knows how many dumb decisions I made in my 40s.
Exactly.
But
Well, you made the right decision building up a law practice.
we'll see. We help people, and that's good. But how's it going to be different this time?
Jared, that's a great question. I think what happens as you get older, I mean, I love David Brooks. He writes for the New York Times, and he talks about career virtues and eulogy virtues. What are the things that make for a good career? And it's obviously hard work and tenacity and ambition. And then he talks about eulogy virtues. What is somebody going to be talking about at your funeral? And I remember when I was in seminary, there was an old Italian priest said, he had us do this exercise. He said, you're laying there dying, and who's around your bed? He goes, he wanted us to literally name who's around your bed. And so you'd say, my daughters are here, so-and-so's here, so-and-so's here. And he goes, and what are you saying to them? And so I think at this point in life, and I'm not being morbid, you're walking down the hill instead of up the hill. And I think that direction profoundly changes your mindset. So when you're a young guy, whether you're building a law firm or you're building a medical practice or running for office or in the nonprofit world, you're climbing up the hill. And so you're developing relationships and you're developing strength. But when you're walking down the hill, for me at least, it's more about the mission. And you become really clear because you also realize, not in a morbid way, but that, when you're in your 40s, I forget who said the expression, why is it that young men fight wars? Because they think they're invincible.
Yeah.
And so what happens is when you realize, when you're walking down the hill, you're slightly more grounded, you're more focused, you're more intentional, and hopefully there's a greater sense of altruism.
But the big part was you felt a sense like pressure to pay back these people that helped you get there. I want to be the head of the Port Authority, or I want to be this, or I want to be that. Do you think it's different in this sort of campaign and for Jersey City?
Yeah,
or do you
because
think
it's local. It's more of a.
It'd be more like when you were the mayor of Woodbridge.
Woodbridge, yeah, it's more of a local race. It's the confines of a municipality. But although what is important is the understanding the scope of government.
Yeah.
I mean, today, whether it's
They say Woodbridge never ran as well as when you were the mayor.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, I was like a nut.
Oh, you were nuts. You're running around making sure the potholes.
Potholes.
And the
I would make
lawns.
sure every pothole was filled. I follow snow plows that make sure that you were plowing close to the curb. I was like, you want the city to run well. I mean, my dad was a Marine Corps DI. He used to say, plan your work and work your plan. So, Jared, I was always about doing it well and doing the basics well. And I think that for me in Jersey City, part of this is getting back to basics, getting back to affordability. I mean, rents and taxes, making sure schools work well. I mean, our schools in Jersey City have a long way to go, and it just becomes, I talk to parents, they're trying to navigate, trying to get into this school or that school because their local school has so many challenges. And then also public safety. I mean, you call 911, somebody should respond within a short period of time and be supportive of those police functions. So I think it's getting back to basics, but part of it, is also bringing back, state support, federal support. It's so important that you engage that. So I think that's one advantage, having those relationships with the state government, with the federal government. So whether it's infrastructure dollars, whether it's paving dollars, whether it's utilities, Jersey City's had all this development, but then I talk to guys looking what's underneath the road, what's underneath the asphalt. You have utilities, you have piping that's literally decades old. And so all of that has to be refurbished, and that can't be done on the back of the taxpayers. You'll kill the property taxpayers.
Yeah, there's a heck of a lot more people in Jersey City using those services.
Yes, exactly.
than the people that live there.
All of a sudden, when you look at those buildings that are going up, everybody has a toilet, Everybody's flushing a toilet. Everybody has a sink. And if you haven't markedly expanded the capacity, that's a disaster in the waiting.
Yeah. All right, we got to get Governor McGreevey out of here.
Yep.
Mark, you got any?
No, that's all. We thank you so much for your time. It was
Thank
a
you,
pleasure
Mark,
meeting you.
and thank you to Jerry. And I just want to say thank you for what you do, what the firm does in terms of advocacy. And the only thing that I would ask that you be mindful is that I know as part and parcel of what you do is you fight for second chances, you fight for equity. But I mean, the need within the Bar Association is to continue to understand the importance of, like, we moved in the right direction with expungements, thanks to Governor Murphy's legislation. But one of the real challenges is, and I heard it this morning when I talked to this fellow, is still this, instead of a scarlet A, the scarlet F.
Yeah,
That
felony.
even with, exactly, Jerry, even with the expungement, the ability today in a media that's instantaneous,
Yeah.
people can see. And so the difficulty of folks that made a bad decision, whether 15 years ago, whether 20 years ago, whether 25 years ago, to get back in. So at the end of the day, if you can't get a job, you're never going to be able to fully reclaim that place in your society, that place for your family.
And how can people help the new Jersey Reentry Corporation?
I
We'll put it in the
just-
show notes too, a link or something.
No, I just, asked them to go on to our website, www.njreentry, or EENTRY, and they can volunteer, they can become an ambassador. And the most important thing is, clearly with addiction, we will get somebody into addiction treatment within 24 hours.
Great.
I mean, and you're seeing these kids, and just as an aside, there's no more heroin in the heroin anymore. It's all fentanyl.
Yeah.
And so now what they also have,
That
they
shit's
have,
deadly.
it's-
One shot.
exactly, so it's fentanyl, and now they have Tranq, which is a horse tranquilizer that's come in from Pensy. And so now what's happening is they have the fentanyl and the Tranq, so that when you try to revive someone with naloxone, what's happening is it's becoming more and more difficult because the tranquilizer has a depressant effect
Yeah.
on the ability for the body to regenerate, whether it's the pulmonology system, whether it's your cardio. And so we will get somebody into treatment within 24 hours, whether it's detox, Jerry, whether it's residential treatment. We just signed an agreement with the Archdiocese of Newark. We have it with different mosques, different shuls. And one of the best things is for parents, working families, nobody's ever been addicted, and all of a sudden your kid's addicted. You don't know where to go, what to do. New Jersey Reentry will get that kid into detox, residential treatment, and intensive outpatient treatment, and if necessary, MAT, medication-assisted treatment with, Suboxone or Vivitrol. Within 24 hours, we'll get that young man or woman, frequently a young man, into treatment within 24 hours. And if you could get that word out to families, that's so important, because that window for their willingness to go into treatment is so small, because after they bottom, they're willing, but then literally 24, 36 hours, when they're back on the streets, that's when the greatest propensity for death may occur.
Yeah. All right, well, thank you for your service to the state as a prosecutor, state senator, governor, and also your now service to the state with the Reentry Corporation. And thank you for your generosity.
Jared,
with
no,
your
thank
time.
you. It was great being here.
All right, awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
Governor,
you,
thank you.
Mark.
Yep.
Thanks so much. Godspeed. Thanks, Mark.
Yep.
Are we on? All right, so Mark, this is a little postscript to the Governor McGreevey podcast episode. I'd hoped it would go longer, 2 to 3 hours or whatever, like most of ours have gone. But the guy he runs around. He's running around a lot. He's I follow him on LinkedIn, whatever, and it seems like every day he's posting something new. He's at like this event, this whatever cultural event.
Yeah, same thing. He's got his Twitter, like every few hours he's posting something.
Wow.
It's a kind of a miracle his phone didn't ring while we were in here. Second we were off, it was every couple minutes.
He probably put it on silent.
Yeah, do not disturb for 25 minutes.
But I think he's like super impressive. He's it's one thing to see someone on TV or in the news to read their book, and that's another thing to see it in person.
Yeah.
And you can see how it all connects. Like you can, he's just got a natural political
Big time.
thing
Like
to him.
a presence where he comes in dynamic, going around. He was calling you,
Jer, yeah, like
as you're going through. And it wasn't.
As I just saw him off in his Uber back to his office, I gave the guy a hug. I feel like, I don't know. I feel like I know you.
We've been buddies for a long time.
Yeah. So I gave him a hug goodbye.
I think it's cool though too. He does not want to be defined by his past either. We're like, hey, we want to talk about the book. He's like, I've done the book.
Yeah.
And you kind of gave him, the chance to be like, oh no, it's not like a downfall. And he didn't take it. He's like, no. It is. So clearly it had a big impact on him and where he's at now.
Yeah. But I think it's cool. I think he's genuine. I think I have like such a similar upbringing to him. Like
I was thinking that the whole time I was reading the book.
I had an Irish Catholic upbringing. Yep. Went to Catholic schools. Thought about at some point. I think every Catholic kid thinks about maybe becoming a priest.
Yeah.
He actually went to the priesthood for a while. He was in the seminary. Clean cut kid. He's got some pictures in his book. He's like taking a picture with the nuns at the school. Like it brought back memories.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously we didn't really get into it. He gets into it a lot in his book, but what a kind of tortured life to live that must be to grow up in this, kind of rigid Catholic environment where, his sexual identity, was kind of so repressed and things. But it's good to be in a time period now where, like you had said, there's different reasons why, he resigned and things, but to be in a society now that's more accepting of, people who are gay, lesbian, things like that.
Yeah, the one thing I did, if we had more time, I would have wanted to talk to him about though, is I always think with like politics and cultures, there's like a spectrum. In a lot of ways, it's like a pendulum swings. Like when you have democracy and elections, it goes conservative, liberal, high taxes, low taxes. And in addition to like a pendulum, there's also a spectrum where like, I think someone said, like conservatives can have the tendency of becoming too rigid and orthodox, but then liberals can have the tendency to become like licentious and like anything goes.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm like, I try to keep like a balance, but I'm wondering, like, I think it's great, so back then a big reason he had to resign was because of the relationship. Mm-hmm. But today that's nothing, like we talked about, like Pete Buttigieg, like it's not, I mean, clearly wouldn't have, and then even having an affair when you're married, like, is that even a thing these days for politicians?
Look at our national race. Yeah.
But one thing I'm wondering is like, does the pendulum swing too far when we start accepting like children having gender reassignment? You know what I mean? And we're doing surgery on kids. That's the one thing. I'm just kind of like a Socratic question out there. Like, does it go too far and too unaccepting? And like, can you marry a goat? Like, is it cool to marry a goat now? And then, well, you can't marry a goat. And like, well, why not? Well, because I don't know why not. Because who are you to tell me I can't marry a goat? I don't know. I'm not taking a position. I'm just wondering at some point does the spectrum.
I know what you mean. I think obviously with that, time will tell. But it's like, you talk about the Second Amendment.
So like I might be able to marry a goat maybe in the future.
Depends who's in office.
Yeah.
But it's like the Second Amendment. It's like, oh, it's my right to keep and bear arms. It's like, all right, is that a musket? No, it's an AK-47. Okay, well, I want a tank and a bazooka, and it's like a flamethrower. Where do you draw the line?
Yeah. Who are you to say I can't own short-range nuclear weapons?
Yeah, exactly.
I have a right to bear my arms.
So I don't know. I just give him a ton of credit too. Again, I keep going back to the book, but how kind of knock down, drag out politics looks like it can be, especially in New Jersey, and to be throwing his hat back in the ring and doing it and everything. You can tell it's a passion, something that comes, pretty natural.
Yeah, I mean, I would like watch national politics almost like a sporting event. Yeah. At least I did. And he loves the stuff. He's like, who's this? And how's this town? And who's this mayor?
Yep.
But I thought it was crazy when he left office. He had $7,000 in the bank.
Yeah, and I was thinking that the whole time reading through the book, when he's talking about the salaries that he's getting at these positions, it's like there's obviously something more that drives people to do this public service.
Yeah, and for him, I think, certainly I think most, people would like power, but for him, I really think it is the guy's got a genuine calling to help, to make a difference. He's got a good liberal streak in him. I don't know if you call it bleeding heart liberal, but what I mean by that is he cares about people.
Yeah.
He cares about veterans. He cares about, and that's a very Catholic Jesus thing. Like, what were the Beatitudes? Do you remember the Beatitudes?
Yeah, that's the fifth.
Visit the
Fifth chapter, fifth book of John.
Happy are they who visit the poor.
Blessed are those.
Yeah,
those
poor in spirit.
Yeah.
Basically the teaching is that you take care of the lesser of the people. And I was in Barcelona, Spain, in like a year ago, and we were outside a Catalonian church, which is Catholic church, and they had a bench and they had a person lying on the bench. It's a sculpture of a person lying on the bench, like a bum lying on a bench.
Yeah.
And I looked closely, and they had, nail holes in their hand, and it's Jesus as a homeless person lying on the bench, and it's a reminder that you're supposed to take care of the least of us, and I think he lives that, Jim McGreevey.
Big time. That's totally agree. I think it's interesting too. He's one of, I would say, a number of guests we've had, like Justice Albin, I think, had a similar background. He spent time in the Middlesex County Prosecutor's Office, or McGreevey spent time in Middlesex County Prosecutor's Office. A lot of the people I saw in the prosecutor's office, like, they had a calling to that type of work. Because it's kind of the same thing. You're not going to, for the most part, buy a mansion working in the public sector like that. But those guys have a calling, and, I appreciate what they do. And same thing with him. Like, he's clearly had a calling to politics throughout his life.
Yeah.
So.
It was cool. That was awesome.
Yeah. Anything, Oscar? You got any?
I mean, the only thing is that, like, it's a calling for him is because a lot of the politicians, after they leave politics, they take either a position or role with, like, big
cash in.
corporations.
Yeah.
They cash in, they're already there's already so much lobbying, or they try to move up the ladder to a place where you could get lobbied even more and you would receive more money. But the fact that he came in and he said, I'm spending my time going to, working on reentry, literally was in prison, was just in prison, just helping inmates, and also is doing that whole program with, the drugs and all that stuff with the kids and with the veterans. That's not somebody that's looking to cash in.
Yeah.
So there's two ways to go about it, and being in politics presents you both ways, and it's pretty clear that he's a very caring person, right? So he cares about the people and he cares about the constituents. And
well,
cool.
It was the same thing with his story, because I think he went to Georgetown Law School. I'm pretty sure he went to Cornell for some graduate degree. He clearly could have gotten a job at a big law firm, making a lot of money right out of the bat. But he, sure, power is a thing, but I think for him it's more public service. It's actually making a change in society and doing well.
Yep. And again, that New Jersey reentry program, he's obviously very passionate about that.
Yeah.
I think a number of the phone calls he was taking were people who were involved in that program that he's helping out.
Yeah, it was a guy, literally,
Yeah.
as soon as he was leaving, he gave a guy his personal phone number that is dealing with a lot of things. He's, I don't know if he was one of the teens or one of the veterans, that he was just calling and he's like, give me a couple minutes, I'm in a meeting and I'm going to go talk to you. And if you're a person that was a former governor of New Jersey, it's not something that you just normally see out of, any regular politician just take away time from their day to not even service people in the light, in the sense of, people are watching, stuff like that. Like, you're in prison, people could see, he's coming. But also behind the scenes, you're literally doing your work and you're taking a cab back, home or wherever, and you're going to be calling him. And that's the behind the scenes. It's the even more behind the scenes aspect of it. And I think that's pretty amazing, or a testament as to what he believes should be a priority, at least in New Jersey politics,
And that's big time a kind of religious thing too. Like, seeing like the priest was, just visiting, or the pastor, whatever, people get sick, they go out and they spend time with them. Kind of seems like that's what he's doing with this program. So yeah, it's awesome. Impressive guy.
All right, awesome. Cool.